What I find in meetings is oftentimes people haven't been willing to slow down to then speed up later. Meaning, like, what is the first principle that Reid has on this and why he feels that way versus like, well, let's just appease him or solve this little gripe that he has right now, but that doesn't really fix the big issue. Core principle, do we want everyone to feel acknowledged? Or core principle, like, do we want to save time? Because it can make this meeting boring if you have to go through everybody's birthday from last quarter or whatever, right? And that would be something where it'd be easy to glaze over, and it'd be like, for now, we'll just keep doing everyone's birthday until all of a sudden you guys make the call to be like, no more birthday updates or whatever. And you have 100 of those decisions as the company keeps growing versus like, from a first principle standpoint, we want to err towards what? So if you can sit down and take the time with, our people department to figure out what is the right move. Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, what was the last meeting you went to death by?
Well, that would probably be the last meeting. No, I'm kidding. They're all a fog when I get to the next, after the weekend or whatever, so I couldn't even tell you. But yeah, the reason you're asking is because I told you about this, or no, Nicole told you about it, I think, this death by meeting book from one of our favorite authors, or I think it's fair to say one of our favorites, Pat Lencioni. Very, well known in the business community, mainly for these parables that he's done. The two that I think are most widely known in the with business is the 5 dysfunctions of team, and then the 6 types of working genius. So it's not a surprise. I just had never really looked up his portfolio, I guess, of books that he does have, probably 10 to 15 in that neighborhood. And many of them follow the same formula. And so my executive coach, Devik, she had told me a few months ago about this one. She's like, I think you get a kick out of it. And I just presumed what I think most people do when you hear the title, and that's part of, I don't want to call it the brilliance, I think it's a little strong, but the cleverness of Lencioni is it's the opposite. So, it draws you in because if you've been in the business world, corporate world especially, you probably aren't a big fan of meetings. And so you see Death by Meeting, it's like, this is a book I need to read. Mm-hmm. And pretty quickly you realize he doesn't, hide it, or it's not like wait to the end for the punchline, that he very much believes in meetings and, in fact, advocates for more meetings, not less.
Well, what's that mean exactly? Or do you want to go through your summary and then come back to some of these?
Yeah, I can. I mean, sticking with the summary, so, again, parable, but it's a company, I think it's a gaming company, has just been acquired by one of their competitors, but, small fish eating up or big fish eating up a smaller one. And so they're going through the transition, and the CEO is a little bit nervous about the takeover and not sure exactly what his role is going to look like post-acquisition. And so he's sitting down talking through the acquisition and some of the immediate implications with his executive team, and then forecasting a little bit further into what things could look like, a year from now. And it's, that seems like a pretty good setup as far as, drama, I suppose, like, pulls you in. But then when he goes around the horn, it's pretty lame. It's not very interesting, and a lot of people are holding things back, and there isn't, much conflict, which, he hits multiple times throughout the book as one of the key tenets of a great meeting. In comes old family friend, like they have dinner, and that night he and his wife with this other couple and their son, who apparently is like some sort of prodigy, with numbers and with engineering. So it's not actually about meetings or leadership, but he comes with more of an engineering background, but loves process. He is in between college and whatever's next and gets an internship at this guy's company that just got acquired. And he sits in as kind of an executive admin because that admin is on maternity leave. And so he helps fill that void, which is beyond the standard internship, and he gets a seat at the table. So that's the setup. Is like now this kid, this wonder kid, is there observing for the first time. Reminds me almost a little of Liam, when he came in and observed Digible. We had I think he's like 14 or 15. I mean, he was.
I know, but I'd hire him.
Yeah, I would too. I would too. And I mean, truly, there's a lot of parallels. And so just start sitting through the meetings, and he can't believe, hopefully this wasn't Liam's take. I don't think it was, but just how ineffective and boring. I mean, I think in the book they say he's got I know, I'm just going to say somewhat on the spectrum. And so, has had a hard time filtering. He doesn't filter well. And the CEO knew that from, his family friend. And so he, would just say, this is stupid or this is boring. But it was that kind of candor and bluntness, kind of abject, criticism that awakened the CEO to hey, we actually have a bigger problem here than I didn't even realize, because this kid in just a couple of meetings is already seeing all sorts of blind spots or issues. And so then I don't feel like this is a summary anymore. But anyway, chapter by chapter. But and you know what? I hope this is still death by meetings. I'm starting to feel like I'm crossing over with another one of his parables. Oh my God.
Let's start with your first point, which is meetings should be interesting.
Yeah, meetings should be interesting. Thank you. Thank God. Everybody's thanking you right now. Thank God for David. But it's basically saying you should have tactical and strategic meetings. And then they advocate for even daily meetings, because they're meetings, often people say, are a waste of time. But if you have more meetings, they can actually save a lot more time, as long as you take the right format. Know that this meeting is just a quick cover-off communication, so that we don't have to be slowed down. We aren't missing context across a group
for 10%
or a company
off or whatever. Now we meet a week later.
Yeah, exactly. Problem. Yep. And then often staff meetings are some awkward blend of strategy and tactical. And he's like, that should never be the case. You should have tactical meetings once a week, and those should be really fast. Those are 30 minutes. They could even be 20 minutes, because you're not trying to solve for anything. It's more, working through. I mean, maybe there's some problem solving, but not much. And then the strategy sessions at the end of the month are, where you're debating, basically key topics, key issues. And those you should be looking forward to. Everybody should. But you could even look forward to some degree, the tactical meetings, as long as you maintain some level of conflict. But if you have no conflict, then that's when everybody just kind of eyes glaze over, and people are just looking at their watch wanting to get out of there. It's why do I have to listen to David talk about his department, and then he listens to me talk about his, and none of us are really challenging each other. Yeah. And so it's uninteresting, and in most cases not even valuable. What's it really moving?
Right? Yeah. You're not moving anything forward if everyone is just appeasing one another or what have you. So what I know that Gino Wickman's a big fan of Lencioni, because he included a lot of his stuff in EOS. I don't know if this book was out by the time when he was writing Traction or not. But what I remember,
I think it was 06. It was either 06 or 08.
So yeah, I think it would have been. But I remember
it does not line up though with Wickman the way he
it's
says
not with his meetings. But I do remember Wickman saying that you need meetings to play like a movie, which you and I talked about offline. And what that means is there's always going to be some conflict and some resolution in a interesting or good movie, and that's where Wickman was going with his 90, with I guess the IDS section. He's hey, there should be some conflict here where it becomes interesting. But what I've also found when I've described that to other people in the past, and they almost seem to get nervous by this idea of conflict in a meeting, or at least exhausted by the thought of every week or every day I would have conflict. So maybe just elaborate on how he settles that, so it doesn't feel like it's an environment where everyone is always at war or something.
Yeah, and I don't remember any like big takeaways other than being respectful, and it's like, well, that's not as easy as you might think. And I think getting back to our last podcast on when I was talking about some of the radical candor, I think she does have a lot of good suggestions in just verbiage and, what types of questions you should ask, how you should frame things so that it feels safer. There's so much of that book is about psychological safety. So he gets at some of that, but he doesn't like let that, I guess, slow down the story. It's more just, I felt like acknowledging that you have to treat each other with respect as you're going through that. Otherwise, good luck getting that conflict back.
Mm-hmm.
It will very quickly shut itself down, and you'll be spending, the next 6 months trying to build up enough trust. And so somebody in the room, and I don't like this expression, even though sometimes it fits, but it has to be the grown up, and you really hope everybody's grown ups. It's not like there's one person that's counted on to facilitate, and that shouldn't be the CEO's responsibility. To me, it shouldn't be any one person's. It's like all of us here, need to be respectful of each other when we're in disagreement, But I wish I had something. I just don't. Nothing stood out as like this is the magic for how you account for that the awkwardness or the fear of friction.
Yeah, and maybe it's with some of what a lot of people that have been in rooms with you and I together is you and I would have vigorous debates, and that I think is getting at some of what this book is saying, where it's like vigorous debate is good. We're not name calling or whatever, and we know that there's not like that both sides have the best intention, right? So similar to Crucial Conversations where they say there's a shared pool of meaning. It's like, oh, we want the company to be better. Now, okay, let's debate that point. Where people struggled was people that aren't practiced, and like you and I before we really built out an executive team at the company for the first 2 or 3 years, that's what we did all the time, right? And it was very frequent. And so then maybe it just more felt like for other executives getting swept up in the stream. Mm-hmm. Like the stream is too fast. It's not like we all sort of like started to boil or whatever, like get to the same speed. And so they're not practiced, and then it feels hard to jump in. And maybe there was less of that safety, or feeling safe for those people for whatever reason. So that's just good learning because I remember I just remember there's some concerns from the executive team before about like, oh shoot, is it really supposed to be that kind of vigorous every time?
Yep. But I think, sorry, real quick, intent for sure is one. And then another that I know I was kind of throwing some stones at Kim Scott, but now I'm going to start. I think I've done this a couple times.
Taking stones
funny.
Back?
Yeah, I'm going to pull some of those stones back. But I did say, clearly there's a lot of value in that book. But she said one of the most tweeted, pieces of advice that she had in her book, this is what I remember, is listen to understand, not to reply. And she's like, that's like plastering on apparently all sorts of walls out in Silicon Valley. And like, I just think about that with debate, like, eventually you're going to reply, right? But if you're listening first to understand, then you're probably going to be, more respectful and productive with whatever your reply is. And Stephen Covey talks about that too. Again, I'll take back a stone. But he just said there's such a big difference. People think about active listening, and you'll appreciate a bit of the contrarian, but he's like, I don't think that's right. I think it's deep understanding is what you're aiming for. Active listening can mean, and for many people it does, that I can just recall what you just told me. And you'll hear people do that all the time. And I'm not, speaking of stones, throwing one at our VP of engineering, because I think it really did help him. But I don't know if it was always deep understanding for Victor, but he, and of course he grew up with his first language as Spanish. So, that may have been part of it too. I'm just a little bit of speculation here. But he often, when he would listen to you or me, and sometimes even in those moments when you and I were going back and forth vigorously, he would say, let me make sure I understand what you're saying here, David. And then he would repeat everything back. And he was very good at that. I found most of the time it's like, you got it all right. But was he really capturing a deep understanding of your perspective or what you were hot about or what you wanted to change to or whatever, was at the root of that. And I think even though that's not something that Lencioni opines or like really stresses, it's the deeper understanding from one person to the next. So if you're in a room with 7, 8 people and you're all putting stuff out there, that you really are trying to have a deeper understanding and not just reply or respond, but listen to understand. And then that is connected to one of our core values is be curious. It's hard for me to like get into kind of that position of listening for a deeper understanding if I'm not even curious. And so if you know, hey, this is coming with the right intent, shared pool meeting, we're all going for the same thing here, and then you maintain that level of curiosity. It's like, well, why is David saying that? Instead of just being, I completely agree or I disagree. Really asking yourself where this is coming from. Then I think that can help.
And it's I agree, and that then starts to feel like a lot of these books connecting, because one of the other things we've talked about here before is that how you're saying like all these books are talking about a different thing, but this starts to feel like it's overlapping with Crucial Conversations, Radical Candor, all these Speed of Trust, like, so that's good, and that's like a positive signal.
Yeah, you look for
right?
those themes, yeah.
Yeah, and so then what I find in meetings is oftentimes people haven't been willing to slow down to then speed up later, meaning like, what is the first principle that Reid has on this and why he feels that way, versus like, well, let's just appease him or solve this little gripe that he has right now, but that doesn't really fix the big issue, right? Like
the root cause.
I'm trying to think of like what a safe thing here to say, but I think it's a fair example. We were... I think it's safe
I love
enough.
seeing that happening like in light speed through your brain. You're like, here's 80 examples. Can I find one? That might be okay.
I was trying to think of a really safe one, and the other people have probably gone through this, but we were just talking about trying to decide which holidays to celebrate.
That wouldn't have been my choice. As soon as I was like, is he going to the holidays? All right, I'll play along. Keep going.
Yeah, well, I think people get it. Like, we are a very inclusive company. We've always talked about that, right? So the simple thing, though, is like you can't celebrate every holiday. We talked about this with like, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg's book. What was the name of that one?
Lean in.
Yeah,
leaning in.
She was saying that like with birthday cakes, you like at first when they were small, it's like they had a birthday cake for every individual. Then it became like we're gonna start grouping people, and then it was like, okay, no more birthdays because there's just too many, right? And Digible isn't. Although I question if Digible is at the like. Do you do shared birthdays now or whatever? Because at 100,
honestly,
people.
You don't know this because you weren't at I think that last all employee meeting, but we killed the personal updates, like the by department, where it's like this person got engaged, this person had a birthday, and I knew there was no winning, you know, because some people were like, "Thank you." I mean, we genuinely got a lot of thank you saying that was the fastest, most efficient, and then plenty of. When I say plenty, let me back that up. There was definitely a few people that were like pretty bummed that we're not including that anymore. And it's like it's the nature of the size of the company. We just can't keep doing it all. So.
I get it, and that Sheryl said the same thing. If I remember in her book, she's like, some people are like, well, I used to get a birthday cake, and now I don't. It's like that's how the company is changing. It's like all that time adds up with that kind of payroll, right? Your 5-minute update, if you were to pull it out on an hourly wage, it's like that's costing thousands of bucks at this point. So, anyways, like I think that is an example of where it's like, okay, core principle. Like, do we want everyone to feel acknowledged? We'll stick with the birthday. It's very easy. Or core principle, like, do we want to save time? Because it can make this meeting boring if you have to go through everybody's birthday from last quarter or whatever, right? And that would be something where it'd be easy to glaze over, and it'd be like, for now, we'll just keep doing everyone's birthday until all of a sudden you guys make the call to be like, no more birthday updates or whatever. And that probably would have been, you have 100 of those decisions as the company keeps growing versus like from a first principle standpoint, we want to err towards what? So if you can sit down and take the time with, our people department to figure out what is the right move, it can save a lot of time later because you just point right back. It's almost like the smack recipe, right? It's like, don't forget the smack recipe. Great. Makes the decision.
Yep. Totally. All right. Well, diving back into death by meetings.
Sure. Yeah.
the tactical and the strategic, I do think, are a great way to distinguish, I guess, or segment your meetings. The one-on-ones, I feel like he also was advocating for more of the reasons. So almost like, can you do strategic and tactical also with your direct reports? And if I remember right, that's something that he felt like you can keep that segmentation, both for team, company, as well as like one-to-ones. And yeah, and I know Margaret, now bringing our facilitator in, but she had said that for you and I, it's like, you guys need to have more meetings, not less. I mean, that's at the executive founder, kind of partnership level. And so I'm struggling with this. I'll just say I have not adopted, the approach yet, but everyone at at our ELT was very fascinated and felt like that kind of core, I guess, principle or thought of tactical versus strategic. Tactical should happen more regularly. Strategic should be less frequent. And then the conflict is critical. Everybody's on board with. So now the question is does this still fit or work within the EOS framework? Because while Gino may, kind of promote a similar approach, it doesn't feel like it works that way with the LV10s. It feels like many of them are a cluster of, and I don't mean just a cluster in general, but a cluster of tactical and strategic. And it could be that we're just, not approaching them the right way, but it's set up as like each week you come in, throw the issues on the board, and kind of argue. I mean, that's where some of the conflict is, which one's most important, and then you settle on that and you solve it. So there's aspects of it. One other thing that I really enjoy about this book's suggestions around meetings is don't come with an agenda. And so he says that's one of the worst things you can do for a meeting, because guess what? That means that, it's pre-scripted, right? And the most important thing often is not actually addressed, because that's how fast business moves. It's like from week to week. So you'll have folks come in and say, we need an agenda. And it's like, but just the last 2 days of last week, this, and this happened. But we're not going to get to that because we had an agenda that we're trying to follow. So he said the smartest thing you can do is set an agenda in your first 10 to 15 minutes of any meeting. I shouldn't say any, but those tactical and strategics. He's like, that's when you set the agenda, is the first 10 to 15 minutes.
And are these recommended to follow like a cadence, like daily, weekly, monthly? You started to say that about strategic as each month, for example. I'm asking that because one of the challenges we went through for a period at Digible is people would throw meetings up on the calendar, but it didn't seem like we knew why we were having that meeting.
Right. We said, let's set the agenda. So I feel like yes, it was tacticals or weekly, and strategics shouldn't be happening more than monthly. And then he did talk about the quarterlies, not with an entire company, but with like an executive team or, let's just say a senior leadership team. And he's like, those are reminding me a little of the butt face Nike, meetings where he's like, those should be the Super Bowls, like that they're going to change the company. And that's not something that should, just be woven into a monthly like strategic. So that's how he set it up. I can't remember as much how he spoke, approached the one-to-ones.
Well, just sticking
as far as frequency
on what you mentioned so far, it seems to me like it could work well if people knew, like you prevent a lot of these smaller meetings to meaning what seems random about your schedule, where people complain about not having a block of time to do deep work. It gets taken up because of all these the
sideways meetings.
Yeah, and it seems like you would prevent those sideways meetings by knowing, like, hey, we have this meeting where we solve things each week or whatever, right? And that's where we can vigorously debate. But that way you can park it. And I found that very relieving when we got on EOS, that we could park it there versus having these randoms. And then I also could see it being very relieving to people to have, like, whether it's monthly or quarterly, those more butt-face style meetings.
For those that don't know, because we've been told we sometimes will make these references and not say, but in Phil Knight's Shoe Dog book, he talks about the the butt face meeting where he and the other executives would go on a week-long retreat?
Yeah.
And they gave each other permission to call each other butt faces. It was like there was no hierarchy, It was just, let's get into the nitty gritty or whatever, the toughest issues that we have at Nike and try to solve for those.
Yeah,
So,
and they were doing them annually for that week.
That's right.
In this case, I can understand, and I appreciate that Lencioni is saying the speed of business because, just we'd need it more than annually, like for Digible to operate. Those some of the things that are coming at the stage it's at. And then I could see like a bigger weekly thing at different points in your annual planning and stuff for sure. So that makes sense to me. Now, in these meetings, it would seem to me, I agree with you that that everyone should be responsible for like understanding the crucial conversations framework and respecting, like treating one another with respect. But it would also seem to me that you would need someone to help drive. You can ask everyone to like call out when they see conflict or whatever, but I say drive that meeting or drive that like, hey, let's drill down. It didn't seem like so-and-so like was cool with that. Just because of my experience, it's if you don't have that driver, everyone starts to let off the gas a bit, right? It's
I don't disagree. That is something I'm not sure. Gonna reference Margaret again, but when we have talked with her in the past, and we didn't get this specific, but just about team health and the roles that we play, so often she'd be like, "No, it's not Reid, it's not David, it's all of you."
Yeah.
And but I really don't disagree with you. I think that gets more almost, speaking of Lencioni, but gets back to the working genius.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, in those 6 geniuses, have the facilitator. I mean, he's got the galvanizer, but like somebody that's really good at facilitating, dialogue, debate, conversations, meetings. And that is a hell of a superpower, for a company to have, or a team, especially the higher up you get, the more valuable I think that player becomes. And so I would just agree, like, that it's good to have that person that you can count on for that. But a really good team, you should have more than one person capable of helping facilitate conflict.
That would be my desired state, right? Because if that person's gone for a week or whatever, then people can fall into old habits, and just
For sure.
So that makes a ton of sense. I wonder if it's the enabler that maybe he would say would do that, because it's like you need to enable the whole team. But I understand why you were thinking galvanizer, because in some, it just makes me wonder if it's the enabler, because you need and Jim Collins talks about this with what you're saying, where it's like if you have, if you do a healthy debate with one another, everyone will. They may be like, well, I didn't agree with the decision, but I said my piece, and so they're more likely to go along with it. Or they may, through the vigorous debate, they may also say, no, that actually does make sense. We did make a good call here. But if you don't, and they don't feel heard or feel brought along with the decision, they may undermine it sort of unintentionally, like along the way. So it makes sense to me that, like what Lencioni is saying, it just lines up with a lot of our stuff.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot more. I'm honestly 4 or 5 books now separated, and but I know some of the same principles that Jim Collins and probably several others talk about as far as consensus, commit, decide and commit, or whatever. What is it? Is vital, like in leaving a meeting. And he also talks about don't have 60 minutes and you're done. It's like if you're, even on the 5-yard line, like, do you think it's better to finish that or to park it, come back and try and restart? Which is interesting because I think it's back to radical candor, but she just talks about how important it is that meetings are punctual. You start on time, you end on time. And we both know I struggle with both of those.
Yeah.
And Lencioni, I feel like, is saying, bad idea. You want to start on time, but don't leave things, hanging, which I know drove you crazy more than once. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those that I'd love to reconcile. It's like, I appreciate, even though I don't behave this way, I do appreciate and respect, the need for schedules. But I just have had so many examples over the years where I'm in a meeting and I am running long, but it's like, and so do I just want to speed it up and be like, hurry up, finish what you're saying, I'll finish what I'm saying so I can get on to the next meeting and start on time?
Yeah.
Or is it better that you and I feel like we really completed, or talk through what we needed to talk through?
Well,
that's where meetings get, out of hand, or at least on my schedule, where it's like, shit, I'm now an hour behind because I'm trying to make sure that I complete, and I know I could be better. I'm not saying that I got this all right, versus like prioritizing the punctuality of meetings, which some people swear by.
Yeah, I'm in all of these other entrepreneurship groups now, and what I've noticed from them is that they have way more open time to kind of like do what you said, where it's like, oh, I guess I'll have this meeting, and they don't have something right at the end of the bookending it where they have to get out the door. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we fell victim to in some ways is not elevating and delegating enough, having where it's like every half hour of our day was booked. So it's like if you do go over by that hour, now you have multiple meetings that are getting impacted afterwards. And I think, I think what I've seen a lot of other successful people do is they have way more.
Define successful people.
Yeah. People that run bigger operations, I guess. I got it.
Because they could be,
and I'll give you the opposite interesting anecdote. But that if you have more space like that, then it can be more the deep work and like deliberate. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, we're going to solve this thing. And it's like, maybe that's all I had today. Or I have one other thing in the afternoon, but it's not like back to back. So it seems to me like there could be just some like, it's almost, Dan Martell talked about that in his book, like how you should be stacking things or not stacking things. And maybe there's more there's more like confrontational meetings or whatever. Maybe they should be less stacked, like where there's just more free time, time afterwards.
Yep.
The opposite of this is actually what Musk does. So super fascinating the way he runs his companies, but it's also not for everybody.
Now running the country.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's not for everybody. So like what from his book and some other things I've consumed since, what I see him as a key person risk. So this is where it would not be, I think, ideal. I think like if not that like Tesla would fall apart without him, but it does seem like he's
not at Musk 2.0 the way Jobs got to that point with Apple.
For sure not, by my read of it. But what he will often do is he will have meetings with 45 people in the room. And the thought process here is, I forget what they said, but they were like every hour of time, his companies do something like $200 million in revenue. And so they view his time as worth like $200 million an hour. It's like a silly way to do it. So then what they do is they're like, if we're going to have a meeting on whatever, like the production line, you don't just have the like executive that runs the production line. You have him and whatever 25 staff he might need to answer a question, because it is worth, and they will actually fly all of those people in to be in the same room as Musk in order for him to be able to help hammer it out, because what he will not accept is that you don't have the answer in the room because his time is too valuable. And I thought that was fascinating. Just to and also his context switching is like he may start there, but then randomly get a phone call that's like, we've got Zelensky on the line or whatever. Do you want to take the call? And he's like, everyone hold, I'm taking the call. He takes the call from Zelensky or whatever, and then like steps back in and finishes the thing. Because so anything he can control, everyone's got to be in the room to make the decision. Things that he can't control, like a Zelensky phone call or whatever, it's like, okay, he may extradite himself to take that call. So, yeah, just super interesting. But I do think he follows the conflict, like the vigorous debate, very well.
No doubt. Well, speaking of the debate, which I am imagining not a whole lot of debate in those meetings with Musk, but versus, command and control, but... Or was I going to go with that? Adam Grant talks about, and I forget which one of his books, but just those examples of the extreme like rivalries, if not hatred, between two groups. I mean, he goes as light, I'll call it light, as the Red Sox and the Yankees fans to the KKK, and I forget whether it wasn't the NAACP, but but I mean, he went extreme is what I'm trying to say. And he's like, and here's how, there's unique scenarios where they actually were able to amicably like resolve an issue or get somebody to understand another point, or their point, their perspective. And he just said it's so important that it's done through questions. And I think that's another, more art than science, I guess. But one of the things that executive teams, probably great teams, are better at or figure out how to do when there's that conflict. If you and I just dig in, which Adam Grant says is what will happen if you don't ask questions. Mm-hmm. It's like, David has this point, I have this point, and we're just going to keep going round and round and round, exhaust everybody who wants to jump in the middle of that. But if you open yourself up, which it helps when somebody's actually asking questions to open up, then you're far more likely to have a productive debate or argument, get an issue over the finish line. I am jumping around on all those sorts of these different books, so bear with me, folks, for those that are still listening. But Covey says he doesn't believe in compromises, which is interesting because I think in meetings, a lot of times that's what people are trying to do. It's like, David wants to do this, Reid wants to do that. We're not going to get to a resolution here, like where one of them is going to get their way. So let's just come to a compromise. And I did appreciate that about Covey. He's like, F compromises. He didn't quite put it that way, but that you could tell he doesn't believe in that. He's like, it should always be win-win. And that actually doesn't come through compromises. That's what kills win-wins. That means usually there's a winner and a loser, or it's some sort of neutral scenario, and that's not actually a win, or that's not the best outcome. So that's a fascinating thing too. I mean, these are all things that are starting to flow through at different times in my mind as we're having meetings. Are we compromising when we shouldn't be? Are we really just taking positions but not asking questions? Are we deeply understanding each other? Are we doing it respectfully? Are we doing it efficiently? I mean, it's a lot, and so finding through these books some of those, as you were saying, kind of themes, patterns is helpful. I mean, that's all I can say is it's helpful, but the application of it, back to what I was saying on the last podcast, but like in the context of Digible, because we're not going to run things the way Musk runs, right? And I don't know that we're in a position to run things exactly how Covey or Kim Scott or even from this last Lencioni book. So you just have to, you can't and shouldn't have to bend too much just according to your personnel or the size of your company, but there are those realities too. So I'm just adding those variables onto everything, that list I just went through. And it tells you why fucking meetings are so hard, so painful. It's like, can I have empathy? Can I keep asking questions? Can I use the right verbiage? Can I read the right kind of inflection in your voice, the expressions on your face, facilitate, wrap other people in so other folks are heard, not have a compromise, if you're the believer of Covey. It's just a lot. And so almost gets me back to your I prefer to have somebody that really owns that, that's really good at it, so that all that stuff that's going through my head, it's like, time out. You're not asking questions.
Yeah.
You are just digging in.
Yeah.
That's not curiosity. That is just...
It's like having a mediator but that is really familiar, like someone on staff. Right, because what hasn't worked is like if we've brought in an outsider that doesn't have the context. Because I've noticed then sometimes the mediator will and it's never officially had that title, right? But that person will then sometimes go off course.
Totally,
that's not really that important. Respectfully,
yeah,
professional that we brought in.
Yeah, they go down the wrong hole.
Yeah, so that's interesting. How do you square this? Not to prolong this too much, but I think it's valid for the discussion. With you really liked Chris Voss's "Never Split the Difference."
Love that book. Yeah.
So how do you square that lack of compromise or screw compromise? Or
well, he says the same thing, doesn't he? My memory is he's like, forget compromising. That's not what negotiating's about. That means you're a bad negotiator.
I think you're right, but
I'm almost positive that was one of his headlines.
Yeah, but I also thought he said something like he didn't believe in win-wins. And so that's why I was...
Interesting. Maybe he... I think you're right. That is fascinating. But I think his reason for that was you either win or you lose, back to never split the difference. Mm-hmm. So in each negotiation, there's a winner and a loser. And compromising doesn't mean you won.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's squaring it, but I think that was his position on the whole win-win versus win-lose versus
maybe we do this in another podcast, but I really I liked the book Getting to Yes. Have we talked about that yet?
I don't think I've read that one.
Phenomenal. It's almost
like Power of Persuasion.
No, I would put it in the same category as Chris Voss's book, meaning like more about like getting to a solution, a resolution. But the difference is, to me, it's like what we just talked about. I can't remember if this is a podcast or another one, but about how different sales styles, like maybe you connect to Zig Ziglar or don't, right? And I was about the challenger sale. I like that better. And maybe this would be similar, where it's like, whether you like crucial conversations or radical candor, it's like, do you like never split the difference or getting to yes? The getting to yes felt more collaborative to me than Chris Voss's, and lines up more, I think, with like what Lencioni, at least how I'm understanding you say it, with the look for win-wins and don't compromise. And particularly in a team environment, I feel like you don't want to be creating any sides, right? It's back to the crucial conversations, like what's our shared pool of meaning? And to me, getting to yes has a lot of the shared pool of meaning sort of style to it. So we can do that in another episode, but
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, the Chris Voss, like, I remember that win-win thing, like, meaning he was against it, which I feel like I need to go back and reread the book to understand it, because it's back to your almost like, what can you get from books even if you if it doesn't land with you? It's like, what insight can you pull out of it? I need to get there.
Yeah, it's a good one. Several of these I think are definitely worthy reads. But the Death by Meetings, just one last
plug.
The plug.
Follow our affiliate link in the description.
Exactly right. We want that $2. I want my $2. You know the movie?
Mm-mm.
Better Off Dead. It's pretty funny. Actually, it didn't age well. I finally got my daughters to watch that, and I took a lot of flack for it.
Oh.
It's like, this wasn't funny, Dad. But is how quick it is, and there is some good contrarian. I mean, I hit some of these points, so I'm not going to repeat them. I'm just saying I would recommend this. But you know, if there's other books, I mean, we'd love to hear or know about them, right? Yeah. You know, when it comes to how to run productive meetings, because we certainly don't have it figured out at Digible. Yeah. And not meaning that they're bad meetings. It's just, I think we #humility, no, we are not masters of this yet.
It's interesting because I feel like the meetings at Digible have been more productive than any other company I've been at, and yet I can still understand and relate why people feel that maybe they have death by meetings here, which both can be true. I feel like it's probably similar to like someone's pay. It's like, this is the best pay I've ever made, and yet I'm still like upset about it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's going to be, onward.
Well, and how do you know? I think that's one of the. I'll end here, I guess, more with a question. But how do you know when you really are having great meetings? Is it the sentiment? Because I don't honestly trust that. Where it's like, how do we feel? Yeah. And if we can check certain boxes, we'll say 9 or 10. But does that really mean that we had a great meeting? That if you were using some of the tenets or I guess criteria that he talks about, is it how quickly, like if you were to look back and look at all those archived issues, we'll say, because that's in 90, on EOS, and how many we actually got solved? Or would it be how many had, I guess, at a certain rating been solved? Or would it be just the company? It's like, hey, look, this were our goals and we executed our goals. Because that for me is more like attribution, right? It's like, forget all the noise of like trying to dive in and, connect all those dots. It's like, at the end of the day, did your media spend or campaign perform, at or above expectation or goal? And when it comes to meetings, is it worth all that effort? Some, yes, but maybe not all, to like try and master meetings. It's like, at the end of the day, I want to know that we're achieving our goals as a company.
I think it's a great point, because as you're saying, you as CEO want to know that we're hitting our goals, right? Whereas the I was trying to think of the right word. I'm picturing like the mob or whatever. Like my grandfather used to have this little cartoon. It was from some comic strip, and you had like the king up in the top of the castle and the mob below the castle, like with their pitchforks.
Pitchforks, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the mob. They kind of care for hitting our goals, but they care more about how they feel leaving a meeting, right? And so if every meeting was like we're giving out soft serve ice cream or funnel cake, they'd be like, meetings rock here, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think it's a great point. Is like, how do you grade a meeting? It's like, in some ways, it's like you want to be hitting your goal and you want people to like be happy doing them. You don't want a bunch of Eeyores coming in because they're like a freaking other meeting. So that is at that point like a balance of like, we got to be hitting our goals, and yet I don't want you guys to get burnt out on meetings because then they churn, and that's not good either. So.
Yeah, I think that's worth the book itself, or should have been part of this book or some of these books, is what's the best way to evaluate a meeting. Because I firmly believe that this EOS criteria is not satisfactory. Not saying it's total SH whatever, but I think it falls short.
Half-ass, not full-ass.
Yeah, half-ass, maybe quarter-ass. Back to that.
All right, well, there you guys go. That's the pod today.
Yeah.